Dr. Randhawa here at Altis. We had a really good question from a visiting coach regarding hip flexors. Now, the athlete that he was discussing has an anterior pelvic tilt and has been experiencing a lot of issues with the hip capsule itself and the hip flexors, of course. And he was wondering if there was any self-calibration the athlete could be doing to help this issue. So I wanted to discuss a common hip flexor stretch that a lot of people are using, and particularly why I don't necessarily like it, but then to also give you an alternative to that, which I define as a hip plank. Now, I'll discuss the hip flexor stretch first. This is the one where the athlete's in a half kneeling position. They're going to drive themselves forward. As they're driving themselves forward, they do start to feel a stretch on that front side there. Now, the reasons why I don't like this. Firstly, it's basically putting you into that anterior pelvic tilt, which is a position that, although may not necessarily be harmful, isn't one that I want to promote. Two, and maybe more importantly, if I have Chris just turn the other way, as they start to drive forward into that anterior pelvic tilt, they start to realize that they're getting a lot of lordosis in their back. And so essentially they're jamming their facet joints together, essentially getting bony stability in this position. And that's something that I don't really like. So instead of doing this particular stretch, define now what we call the hip plank. And looking at a way to have co-contraction on the back side and the front side to allow us to get into that capsule a little bit more. So to start off with, what I'm going to have the athlete do is put their toes into the ground. Now, before we even get to this position, it's crucial that you screen out the athlete's foot to ensure there's no issues with the big foot itself. If there was a sesamoid or whatever have you, issue that's irritating to the athlete, we definitely don't want them to be compressing that foot any further, especially if we're trying to get after a stretch that we have multiple ways of dealing with. But we'll assume for this that they've been cleared, and that's okay. We'll have the athlete put pressure through those toes and through the knee and push into the ground. Now, when we're doing that, what we're getting is a bit of an activation on that anterior chain, especially through his hip flexors. I'll then ask the athlete to get a good contraction through the glute. Now, if I was to liken this to any exercise, if I had his knee just slightly off the ground, we're essentially in a split squat position, getting co-contraction on both sides to complete the actual movement. So now that I know that the hip is activated from the front and getting some kick from the back, I'm going to help to stabilize the pelvis a little bit further by utilizing the lat. Now, to do that, the cross arm, or the one that isn't down, is going to grasp a dowel. Have the athlete push that dowel into the ground. I don't want to be able to lift this off the ground at all. When we do that, we're ensuring we're getting some of that lat involved. And again, this is just to help stabilize the pelvis. I'll then throw in a little bit of anterior sling work, and if you're familiar with a foundation course, you become accustomed to some of these fascial slings. And so we have the athlete reach forward with their hand. I'm going to ask them to extend the wrist and the fingers completely, pushing into my hand. The cue we like to give here is Spider-Man your hand. Now, the last thing that I want is to always ensure that the spine is in a neutral position. For this, I want the athlete to project themselves vertically. In this position, I'll ask Chris to push his head up into my hand. Now, I know I have a neutral spine. I know that the hip is neutral, and now I'm getting some co-contraction around that hip, essentially creating a plank position for the hip. You guys, go ahead and give this a try. Let us know what you think. Keep those questions coming, and we'll do our best to get videos out to help you answer them. Thanks again.